talk through the background so that you can sort of understand where it's come from as a piece of work. Very much co-produced or co-designed, should I say, with the National Network for Parent Carer Forums in the Yorkshire and Humber area. And with Genuine Partnerships, Claire is our representative from there today, from Rotherham, and NDTI and the Preparing for Adulthood team. So just to kind of say that the route was really to do with a meeting, a really dynamic meeting that I attended with an NPCF, where there was a lot of discussion about how inconsistent the offer was for families and young people with SEND in relation to PFA in different local areas. And we know from SEND inspections that that's often an area that comes up, is preparing for adulthood and transitions. And that's not to take away from how difficult it is within our current sort of context strategically to really join up the dots. But nonetheless, what we wanted to do was build on work that Genuine Partnerships have done around co-production, positive conversations, which we'll talk about in a minute, and really help kind of breathe some ideas into how local areas could assess themselves and talk about developing action plans for PFA against, what is the minimum? What is the minimum that needs to be able to be available for young people and families? And obviously, ideally, not just the minimum, but more. I'm going to talk more, well, Claire will talk more about co-production in a minute. I suppose what's important is for us to just make sure that we're emphasising that point around productive conversations, which very often come from quite difficult conversations, or certainly ones where people are coming at things from different angles. And from my experience and the learning, I suppose, through this project, it's clear that parent and carer forums have an incredibly difficult task in terms of being assigned, if you like, to sit in very strategic meetings quite often, to bring the voice of parents and carers into the room, to in many cases hold local area professionals to account on particular issues. So we wanted to make the tool something that was really kind of simple and easy for them to use and informed by their voice, hence how we produced it. I've talked about the self-assessment with a view really to leading to action planning and feeling like there's something that's wholly co-produced or certainly co-designed. I'm not sure how co-produced. There's lots of different ways in which people use that term, but we want to make sure that meaningful relationships are developed as a result of working with this tool, not just before this tool. People work collaboratively and creatively, so they're creating solutions when it comes to those action plans. And I suppose that's all about enabling and building trust, which Claire will speak about a bit more in a minute. I just want to familiarise all of you again, I suppose, seen it with this graphic. This was literally co-produced back in 2011 to 2014, before the Children's Act 2014 and the SEND Code of Practice. NDTI was involved in working with over 400 families to talk about what is it that prevents young people with special educational needs and disabilities from enjoying ordinary lives, and in particular the focus of those discussions was around employment. But what fell out of that was all these other really key and fundamental areas of life. Employment, yes, and that doesn't need to only be paid employment. It's about making a meaningful contribution in your community, feeling like you're needed and valued. Obviously, we would always advocate for young people to have equal, pay and be paid in the work that they do, and to have guided steps to enable them to have supported employment should they need it. Independent living, those small steps that can be so huge for some young people to start to enjoy that feeling of being able to do things for themselves. Right from being able to choose which clothes they wear, right through to doing their own laundry, through to looking at places they may want to live in the future, what sort of situations they'd like to be in, certainly in my work, I do a lot of work with young people around, do you want to have relationships? We talk a lot about that, and we talk, do they want to be married? Do they want to have kids? These are conversations that in that original consultation, my colleagues who worked on this programme before me would say that families were saying there isn't enough chat about that. There isn't enough talking about where young people want to go in the future. And therefore, when we suddenly talk about it, which can happen, it's really terrifying, and people respond with a real sort of possible fear actually around too much too soon, around the post-16 and the sort of cliff edge, as many people know it as. Community inclusion, really sitting behind that is friendships and relationships, and we know that many young people face periods of isolation, but actually some of them, in particular post-pandemic, we're seeing a lot of young people who have lost the threads that they might have had to the beginnings of friendships as a result of the disruption, and how key it is for us to be equipping them with skills to know how to use WhatsApp, stay in touch with someone that they used to go to school with, those very basic but important things that many of us might have mastered a long time ago, and reflecting back, have friends from school. So always ensuring that people are progressing into adulthood with assets, with friends, and a sense of community. And health, just being able to, in many cases with complex health needs, we've got some really important and fundamental issues to face in relation to the different thresholds and ages around children's services and adult services in health. And in mental health in particular, where many young people can fall through the gap, but also in sort of equipping young people to manage their own health and the important ways that they can start to feel that it's something that they own and that they can look after. I'm going to hand over to Claire now, because this relates to the work that we've done in the group and the long discussions that we have had around the musts. And I suppose what I'd want to just flag is that there are often occasions where we've talked about, that's a must in the code of practice, so it's got to be a minimum standard. And then we'll have another discussion around something that is, well, it's not a must, but it should be a must. And I think that's just part of how I just wanted to give you a flavour of some of the discussions that have happened behind this piece. So I'll hand over to Claire here.
Thanks, Alice. So if you look on the left-hand side, there's a link to a really useful document on the Preparing for Adulthood website around what must happen according to the Code of Practice. So the document includes information about Chapter 8, Preparing for Adulthood, but also Chapter 4 on the local offer. And you can see in the text as well that parent carers, children, young people with SEND must have been involved in the development design of the PFA section of the local offer. And I think in feedback, certainly from our parents and carers and young people, it's that absence of information around this area that makes it feel like a cliff edge often, and that's how they would describe it. So that is why that's important. I think it's a key area of focus in this area. But also generally that feeling that you have some ownership and you're a partner, an equal partner in the decisions that are made about you and about your children and young people. So children and young people with SEND and their families must feel that their views and opinions are included and valued in that decision making, is in the Children and Families Act. And local authorities must place children and young people and families at the centre of their planning and work with them to develop a coordinated approach to securing better outcomes, as should the clinical commissioning groups or the ICSs, as they will be. Local authorities must ensure that EHC plan reviews, I'm sure you know this at Year 9, and every review thereafter must focus on preparing for adulthood. But we would always say that actually way before Year 9, even from early years onwards, thinking about, so where's this going when decision making is happening at reviews, and thinking about aspirations in the future. and transition planning being built into the process and then being built into reviews, outcomes being agreed that are ambitious and stretching, that are going to prepare young people for their next steps in a graduated way, are all musts. But what becomes minimum standards, it's much more than that when thinking about preparing for adulthood. It's what does that mean in practice when it comes to experience. Also important to think about is working on this with your local parent carer forum. I don't know if anybody's here representing a parent carer forum. So the role of parent carer forums is often misunderstood. Their role is to work in partnership with local authorities, settings, health providers, other providers, to highlight where local services, processes and commissioners are working well, and to challenge when things need to be better. And this is an area, preparing for adulthood, that's often flagged up by parent carer forums, and certainly it has been in Yorkshire and Humber, because that's why this piece of work happened in the first place. And there are parent carer forums across all the local areas. The aim of a parent carer forum is to encourage and empower participation for families, to make sure that services in areas meet the needs of children with SEND and their families, and to get voices heard to shape services. So it's to reach out to do that. They have that role, and to gather views. But it's about working in equal partnership. It's the co-production part that's crucial in enabling this kind of approach and the implementation of the minimum standards to work and work effectively. It isn't about one partner driving it. It's got to be a joint approach. And there's Jane's name there. Currently she's our new NPCF lead for Yorkshire and Humber. She would be here today. She has been here today, but wasn't able to stay. So this would normally be Jane's slide. So she's my co-lead as well in genuine partnerships. So who are we? We came.
You ready for me to go to this slide, Claire?
Is this not my slide, Alice?
Yes, it is. Sorry, I flicked on and I was worried I'd done it too quickly. Sorry.
Oh no, I thought I'd done it as well. So we're working in tandem. So who are we, Genuine Partnerships? We came together 2009-10, a group of practitioners. We've been doing some research with families and with young people about their experiences of SEND, and Rotherham Parent Carers Forum had just started that point. We were invited to a big Senko conference on Brian Lamb's report on improving parental confidence. And that's where we met and began to work together. We were fortunate enough to be successful in an innovative bid to be one of the projects around the Lamb inquiry. And through that work, we created a set of principles based on what families and young people were saying. We co-produced them. We were in big rooms around blank sheets of paper. And the thing that would make the difference, the thing that would enable trust, that's so essential in preparing for adulthood, because it feels risky for families and it can feel like a big void for young people as well if the information's not there and they're not sure how to get to where they want to be. So the thing that's the way of working that's important is that people need to feel welcomed and cared, that people care about them and their future, that they feel valued as people and included, that communication is good, and that there's that working in partnership. And those principles that we had, that we called the Rotherham Charter, became known as the 4 cornerstones for co-production. If you put those in place, then co-production can work. And we would understand co-production to be working on something from the beginning, as opposed to consultation, participation, where somebody else has the ideas initially. So that's our understanding, that you're working on something in equal partnership from the start, and that it's inclusive, so that everyone's included and accepted as an equal, and that includes the family and the young person, because this is about them. And so we were asked by Alice to be involved in this piece of work to produce the minimum standards and to think about this. And Julie Bruce, who was at that point representing the NMPCF, was really keen that the cornerstones were informed this piece of work. And so I think it was a questionnaire, Alice, that went out to partners and actually began with the cornerstones. So it was around preparing for adulthood. How well does your area welcome and care? How well does it do? And there was some qualitative feedback that fed then into thinking about what needed to go into the minimum standards. But the cornerstones also feature within that document, within the minimum standards, because co-production, as I've just explained, that sense that everybody's involved and that communication is good and that people feel there's somewhere to go, that will welcome them, that there are opportunities, that they feel valued, that it's a partnership approach. That's so important in this. So we did a piece of work in Rotherham that highlighted from parents and young people that transitions to adulthood and planning them and plan them with me. That's one of our 3 key SEND priorities. The other ones are believe me, and get me help quicker. But the reason they're important is because that's what families and young people are telling us. And I'll leave it there, apart from to say we're also working, this is a part of our written statement of action, but we'd already identified it is a key area. So I'll hand over to you, Alice.
Thank you. So just the context before we look at the tool for it together, and then collect perhaps some reflections from you and comments. What we did what we did was we used those 4 cornerstones, and as Claire said, we put them out as part of a sort of consultative survey, not just to parent carer forum representatives in our region, but also to local authority SEND leads. And alongside that, we had these key questions relating to preparing for adulthood. So we got this huge amount of qualitative data, if you like, and it was based upon that data that we've developed the tool. And key questions are listed here for you. Thinking about education providers, and it's at this point perhaps we've learned from the last workshop that this is really short, and where we'd hoped to put you in breakout rooms and have you chatting and bring us back feedback, it might be best if you do have any reflections, or if there's anything we're saying that resonates with the work you're doing, or things you'd like to know more about or you'd like to expand upon, could you please use the chat, because we will be looking at that after this session. So a key question around, do education providers in your local area and different services prepare young people for SEND for adulthood? You know, what's happening in that arena? And we heard a lot from people who responded. We had 11 responses across 7 local areas. So, and they were local authority and parent care forum. There was a common issue around not enough on independence issues being taught in schools. So, you know, in special schools, in secondary schools, there was a real commonality around people saying there wasn't enough careers advice. And then the lack of, in some cases, lack of strong relationships. So in particular between SENCOs and parents, you know, where it worked well, it was really positive. And in that, if that SENCO had got PFA and, you know, had got preparing for adulthood and understood exactly the significance from early years right through, then it was a really positive experience. But in many cases, there was a discussion about people feeling that that was inconsistent. And in some areas where that relationship wasn't positive, it was a really problematic area for families and hence for young people to move to become more independent. Not enough made of annual reviews, the potential of them not being seen as, you know, a real opportunity to prepare the family as well for conversations about their young person's journey into independence. When it came to employment, we had a lot of discussions around lack of long-term planning. You know, so when we're thinking all along in education and right through to post 16, we're enabling young people to think about their aspirations, and we're noting what they're interested in and what their passions are, but also we're supporting them to develop ideas, and indeed their families, about what that could lead to, and the potential, their potential, to be really involved in employment in the future, and to get work experience, to develop vocational profiles that can assist them to sort of work out what they would need to be included in working environments. When it came to sort of friends and community, when we're thinking about whether young people with SEND and their families are encouraged enough and supported enough to build good relationships, some really important discussions took place about how quite simple things about enabling young people to know how to stay in touch with each other independently, in particular if they're moving schools, or if they're moving from secondary or special school to college, you know, not to lose the friendships that they've built, and to be confident enough to develop new friendships alongside that. So a really important kind of area of conversation with young people that is fundamental to their mental health, because we know that without friends, people can become incredibly socially isolated, but also it can affect their mental health. So Joanne's put specialist information, advice and guidance is a weak area for us. And says, Joanne, I can't remember where you work. Do you want to just come on mic and tell us?
Yes, Darlington.
Darlington.
Local authority. We don't have anybody specifically employed by the LA to provide independent advice and guidance, and it's very difficult for SEND officers to monitor through the annual review process what information, advice and guidance our young people with an EHCP are able to access.
Yeah, and yet we've got the Gatsby benchmarks, which all schools have a responsibility to fulfill. So, but it's not a common issue. It's not uncommon to find that in specialist careers advice there is a gap. So thanks for that. And that's something we'd want to breathe into your action plan. Do you know what I mean? Through just discussing these points. Another area that came up through employment was showcasing and you know, working with employers is often a challenge for people in local areas. However, where employers are working to support young people with SEND on work experience or trying out work, it's getting those stories and getting that feedback and being able to breathe it into that local offer, so that somebody looking at it is going to see that there is potential for them to be involved in the employment market in their locality as well. We have a lot of case studies on the Preparing for Adulthood website, which are holding up, if you like, exciting and important steps that young people have made into employment. But it's really pertinent for young people to see that from their own local area, isn't it? And to kind of feel that they actually recognise places that are being identified. Health, do health services support children and young people with SEND to progress towards adulthood, well-being and independence? And I know we've got lots of health colleagues on the call today, and I think this is a really interesting area, because very often families are attending a lot of different appointments and engagements with health professionals, some of whom are incredibly progressive about trying to enable the young person in particular to manage their own health and to understand about annual health checks and opportunities that they may have as they move into adulthood. But nonetheless, that was a very common issue about that cliff edge between children's health services and adult health services. So moving from a paediatrician where families had felt very safe, they felt they knew they were known, and they'd got a really good relationship, and then suddenly being in a different landscape completely and not having a point of contact to find out how to engage with adult health services that would pick up areas that were particularly needed. And that came up a lot through around CAMS in particular. And then the last area was independent living. And And I suppose this area is, again, it's going to be dependent on what is already happening in your local area in relation to supported independent living accommodation, but also how much are schools doing on independent living and linking with those opportunities. And one thing that came up really strongly actually in a conference that we held recently nationally was how housing seems to be outside the sphere of influence of health people, education people, and sometimes even social care people. And actually that local offer needs to show how housing is the different options that are available. We've got some quite useful information now on our website about that from the conference, but I think it's a really important area, and that came up a lot through the feedback that we got from parents and carers and indeed local authorities. And an issue around families being quite reluctant to discuss that area because of fear, the point that Claire's made. You know, some people can feel really apprehensive about this stage. They've done all of their effort to maintain the status quo and keep getting some support. And suddenly we're talking about really significant changes. And it shouldn't be suddenly. That's the point, isn't it, about working early?
There are quite a few comments in the chat, Alice, but I'm also conscious. Yeah, I'm also conscious that we haven't seen the tool yet, so no. I don't know if you want to.
Let's pick up. Let's pick up the comments because we've got 8 minutes. Sorry, I've gone on too long, haven't I? It's such a short workshop.
So it's great that there's a family support hub through the Neuro Pathway, Michelle Louise's put, where that's an opportunity for families to meet and discuss pathways available. I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and thank you for your observations there about somebody being seen as a person and not numerous appointments. I'm going to take us now to the tool itself, which I know you've seen because I'm sorry, we haven't got Marie on the call, have we? Adiba. What Marie did for us last time was just go into the tool quickly and assist us to see, have a look through it. Would you be able to do that? Would you like me to do that?
I'm happy to do that. So just click on the link and share my screen.
Yeah, thanks. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to look at it, as I say, it is in draft, I suppose, although we've worked quite hard to make it a simple, manageable tool. If I stop presenting, Adiba will bring it up for us to just scroll through together and have a look at.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, thank you. So if you just pause at the contents page, just to give people an idea of what's in there. So we've got a lot of the background that myself and Claire have given, and then the standards themselves are the tables further down with a view to then defining your priorities. So if you scroll down now to the table section, Adiba, thank you. Carry on down, that's it. And then just keep going quite slowly through the document for me. So this is the 4 cornerstones, and then as we go down the document, we move into the preparing for adulthood, co-produced areas to discuss. And the idea, of course, is that people work collaboratively together, multi-agency with parents and carers to look at answering these questions, looking at what evidence there is, and then scoring them and thinking about actions. And the actions in that last column will be brought together in Adiba. If you go right down the document slowly and you get to the end, you'll see that there are actions. So it's not unfamiliar. I'm sure many of you have used some far more comprehensive audit tools, but this is one that's very much made by the group, and it was felt to be important to make it simple and manageable. If you go right down to the bottom, there are actions that can be listed in priorities. Ooh, that's the very bottom. This is where I should be scrolling it myself, don't worry. Thank you very much, that's really useful there. And if you just pause there, I do want to highlight that the appendix to this tool is really useful as well. So going back to that slide that Claire spoke to about the musts, what we've done is we've just kind of really carefully thought about what information is key for people to have in front of them as they work on this. So I'm going to ask if we could come out of presentation mode. Thank you, Adiba, and just use a few minutes to get some reflections from you. And the question that we want to ask really is whether you think this tool would be useful in your local area. Please do turn your cameras on because it's nice to see people at the end of this session.
I'll just add a reminder the session's being recorded, so if you don't want your face on recording, keep the camera off.
Thanks. Oh God, I should have told me that. I would have had mine off. Hi Joanne, have you got a question? Or a
no, I was just saying that it's really simple, comprehensive tool, and for us, we know that we need to improve as a local area on this. It's a real priority for me personally, and for us as a whole. I think it's something that we're not doing very well. So I do think it's something that we can use, and we've got a really good, strong parent carer forum who is part of our strategic leadership group in Send, where we are not doing so well is we would like to get more young people involved at that strategic level. So we're just exploring at the moment opportunities to do that. We do have a participation and engagement officer within our authority, but I'm not sure that it's reaching the people that we want it to reach.
Thanks. I think that's a useful reflection. It came out of the last workshop as well, and it's worth saying that we haven't yet adapted this to be done with young people in a way that's completely young people friendly. There is another program that I work on called Time to Talk Next Steps, where I work directly with young people, and there is a team of young people from that project who are keen to deliver training to professionals on not just PFA but on building resilience and working in a person-centered way. So I'm going to make sure I put my email in, and you're really welcome for me to put you on the list if you're looking for young people who might be interested in supporting your work.
Thank you.
Some of the pilot areas as well might have some feedback from their young people that would be useful.
That's a good idea. Yeah. I'm just going to make sure I cut and paste into the chat the event that we're holding on the 22nd of March. When the 3 local areas who are trialling the tool will be sort of reporting back. And that's in the slides as well, but there's a link there to booking onto that event online and joining us to hear more about how that's gone and feeding in more views. Are there any more questions or reflections that people would like to share about whether they would use this tool or what they think's missing? Michelle. Is it Michelle? I can't see your name. Sorry.
It is, yeah. Sorry, I'm lagging behind a little bit here. I don't know whether I'm frozen or you're frozen. I'm not sure.
I'm rocking now.
Yeah.
Right, you're definitely not frozen. I think it might be me. No, it was just to say thank you really for this session, because it's been really good. I work in the same locality as Joanne Littler, and Joanne's doing a fantastic job just coming in as interim SEND manager, head of SEND, and she's doing a fab job. We've just recently had our SEND inspection as well. So I think this is kind of reiterates the thoughts and the thinking about where we need to be as a local authority, especially in the first workshop, the first overarching workshop as well. We're definitely on the right track, but I think the outcome from the SEND inspection will sort of like strengthen that really. But I just wanted to say thank you, because it's been really useful, especially for me as a commissioner. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Michelle. I'm glad to hear it.
Thank you.
Hi, yeah, really useful, and we've just had an inspection as well, and we've got to work on our transitions too. But some of the things as well, and somebody mentioned it earlier, is about those at SEN support. So it's making sure that those at SEN support have the same sort of thing wrapped around them, because do they get the same annual review? I'm not sure that they do. Then and they won't get the preparing for adulthood bit. And I've seen a young person who was amazingly supported at his mainstream school, who was on the autistic. Once he went off into his apprenticeship, he hadn't got any evidence because he hadn't got any HCP to say what level of additional needs he'd got and how he needed supporting around that. So it's making sure the SEN support group aren't missed out too. But I think it's a really, really useful tool.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, and it's certainly one of my absolute passions personally, because I'm the parent of somebody on SEN support, and actually there is a massive gap, and you can see all these wonderful things that are meant through annual reviews, but if they're not getting them at SEN level, then it's no good. Just a couple of things to mention. As a team, we're always happy to kind of facilitate and support local areas who want to have these conversations and work through tools, as rather than, I mean, you can do it yourself, but actually that might be useful. And there's the vocational profile, Kathy, which I think would be a really useful tool, because it is a passport is a bit of a funny word, but it's something that a young person can develop and then take with them through education and on into their next steps. It's not a CV. It's a really important way to talk through a person-centered way with a young person about their passions, their interests, their friends, where they like going, you know, right through to, if I was in a job, I would hate to be in a crowded place. I'd really like to be outdoors all the time, or, you know, these are the things I'd need you to know for me so that I can work, you know. And I think those things, I think it's a really lovely way for people to work across education and into the next stage. So I will put a link to that in here if I can get my act together. Claire, did you want to come back on any of those points?
No, only that I would absolutely agree with what Kathy said. With my other hat on as an educational psychologist, they're the young people that arrive at college that often then begin to struggle there, and sometimes end up submitting requests for EHC assessments as older young people, and should that be needed, if the planning was done and the support was, the communication was good between the providers as well, between school and the provider. So it's the cornerstones, really.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of time. We've come to the end of quite a long afternoon, and Adiba's kindly put the evaluation form for today's event in our chat. I think that's for the whole event. Is it, Adiba?
Yeah, it's for the whole event. If you have some time, could you please fill it out? Thank you.
Yeah, so if you could click into that, and then as we close, we'll stay here for a couple of minutes, but the workshop has finished and you're free to go and get that long-awaited cup of tea.
Thank you.
But thank you. It's been really nice to meet you, and the slides have got all the links.
Thank
and
you.
information.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
That's
Thank
great.
you. Lovely
Thanks
to meet
very
you
much.
all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.